Ted Bundy was born in 1946 in Vermont and raised by his grandparents under the belief that his mother was his sister, a deception that would later be seen as the first of many layers to his fractured identity. Despite a troubled early life, Bundy projected a charismatic, intelligent persona. He studied psychology and briefly attended law school. To most people, he was clean-cut, articulate, and charming. But beneath that surface, he harbored deeply sadistic fantasies. Beginning in 1974, young women started disappearing in Washington, Oregon, Utah, Colorado, and eventually Florida. Bundy's method was calculated. He often feigned injury, using a sling or crutches to solicit help from unsuspecting women, then knocked them unconscious with a blunt object and abducted them. He would sexually assault and murder his victims, often revisiting their bodies to engage in necrophilic acts, sometimes for days after death. Some victims were decapitated, others were severely mutilated. His first arrest came in 1975 in Utah, when police found a suspicious collection of items in his car: rope, a ski mask, handcuffs, and a crowbar. Though he was initially convicted only of attempted kidnapping, investigators began connecting him to numerous unsolved cases. While awaiting trial in Colorado for a murder charge, Bundy executed his first escape in June 1977 by jumping from a courthouse window during a recess. He survived in the woods for 6 days before being caught. Months later, in December, he escaped again, this time by sawing a hole in the ceiling of his jail cell and crawling into a guard's apartment. He vanished for weeks, eventually resurfacing in Tallahassee, Florida, where he committed his most notorious and brutal crime. On the early morning of January 15, 1978, Bundy broke into the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University. In a rampage lasting less than 15 minutes, he bludgeoned and strangled Lisa Levy and Margaret Bowman to death and savagely attacked Karen Chandler and Kathy Kleiner, both of whom survived. Hours later, he assaulted another woman, Cheryl Thomas, in her apartment, leaving her permanently deaf in one ear with a shattered jaw and fractured facial bones. Lisa Levy's corpse was sexually assaulted. Bite marks were left on her buttocks, and one of her nipples was nearly torn off. Margaret Bowman had been beaten so savagely with a piece of firewood that a chunk of her skull was missing. At the crime scene, police found hair samples, blood evidence, and impressions of Bundy's footwear. The brutality and swiftness of the attacks stunned investigators, and for the first time, Bundy had left behind forensic evidence that could definitively link him to the murders. He was apprehended on February 15, 1978, in Pensacola by Officer David Lee. Bundy was driving a stolen car and initially gave a false identity, but his fingerprints revealed the truth. Florida authorities charged him with murder, and the stage was set for a landmark trial. In June 1979, Bundy was tried in Miami for the Chi Omega murders. The trial was the first in U.S. history to be nationally televised, drawing intense media attention. Bundy insisted on representing himself, rejecting the advice of his court-appointed attorneys. His narcissism led him to believe he could manipulate the courtroom and dismantle the state's case through his charm and supposed legal expertise. The courtroom became a twisted stage for Bundy's ego. He dressed sharply, smirked at the cameras, and made frequent eye contact with reporters. He cross-examined witnesses, including police officers, and even one of his surviving victims, Kathy Kleiner. He routinely filed objections and attempted to delay proceedings, drawing out the trial with unnecessary legal theatrics. Despite his efforts, the prosecution, led by Assistant State Attorney Larry D. Simpson, presented a powerful case. Witnesses testified to seeing Bundy near the Chi Omega house the night of the murders. Bundy's stolen vehicle, a Volkswagen Beetle, was linked to evidence found at the scene. Hair samples from the victims were found in the car, and vice versa. The most damning evidence came from forensic odontologist Dr. Richard Suviron, who testified that a bite mark left on Lisa Levy's body matched Bundy's dental impressions. His teeth were unusually crooked, with distinct chips and rotations, features that created a nearly one-of-a-kind imprint. A plaster mold taken of his teeth matched the bite on Levy with remarkable accuracy. Bundy, who had believed he could out-talk the case, was visibly shaken when the bite mark evidence was presented. For the first time during the trial, his confidence appeared to falter. In a bizarre and disturbing twist, Bundy proposed to his longtime supporter Carol Ann Boone during the penalty phase of the trial while she was testifying on his behalf. In Florida at the time, a verbal marriage declaration made in court in front of a judge constituted a legal marriage. Boone later gave birth to Bundy's child while he was on death row. The jury, unimpressed by Bundy's antics and unconvinced by his charm, took less than 7 hours to convict him of 2 counts of first-degree murder, 3 counts of attempted murder, and 2 counts of burglary. He was sentenced to death by electric chair. In 1980, Bundy was tried again for the abduction and murder of 12-year-old Kimberly Leach, who had been lured from her school in Lake City, Florida, raped and murdered. Her decomposed body was found in a pig shed. This trial added a second death sentence to his fate. While on death row, Bundy stalled his execution for nearly a decade through a series of appeals, interviews, and manipulative last-minute confessions. In the final days before his execution, Bundy confessed to at least 30 murders, though investigators suspect the actual number is far higher. His confessions were chillingly detailed and devoid of genuine remorse. He admitted to decapitating some of his victims and keeping their heads for days. He described returning to crime scenes to commit necrophilic acts long after the victims had died. On January 24, 1989, Ted Bundy was executed in Florida's electric chair at Rayford Prison. Outside the prison, crowds gathered with signs that read "Burn Bundy Burn," and fireworks lit up the sky as news of his death spread. Bundy died without ever showing real remorse for his actions. His case continues to haunt the American psyche, not just because of the horror of his crimes, but because of how deceptively normal he appeared. He was the charming man next door, a student, a coworker, a boyfriend, and he was a cold-blooded killer. The trial remains one of the most disturbing in history, a brutal reminder of how evil can hide behind a smile and a suit.